Yes. Yes, we're good. You
Yes?
can come back on camera. You should be okay.
You can see my screen?
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay.
Just bring your camera back on. Let's see if we can see you as well. Yes.
Okay.
So we're perfect.
Good. Wonderful. All right. So the presentation this evening will cover joint protection, joint care, and mobility. And we'll go through some practical guidelines of how we can manage challenges that we're having in terms of pain or lack of endurance and those types of things. So the objectives today are to identify what is joint protection, and as I said, how we can apply those within different contexts in the household and in the community. So when I was preparing for this presentation, these are two quotations that really stood out and speak to this time of our lives in terms of not being able to engage in activities that we normally would and having to change the way in which we operate. And so the World Health Organization starts out by saying health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And so tying back into what the profession or professional occupational therapy promotes in terms of participation and independence, it ties in really nicely with this next quotation that states, man, through the use of his hands, as they are energized by mind and will, can influence the state of his own health. And so I hope by the end of this session, we'll be able to engage more safely and freely in our desired activities and occupations, and as a result, enhance our health and well-being. And so we're going to start by defining what joint protection principles are. And just so that we're aware, joint protection is not an intervention. It is an active coping strategy to improve the performance of daily tasks, the engagement in your roles as a mother, a wife, a father, a child, reduce frustration, and maintain independence and improve psychological status. And so joint protection speaks to being able to alter work methods. And we're going to talk about the use of correct body mechanics within different contexts in the house. And we're also going to, where we can make change in terms of our body mechanics and the way in which we do things, we as OTs prescribe assistive devices that can improve the function and participation in a desired activity. And it also speaks to modifying the activity and the routines to ensure engagement. We're also going to look at pacing the activities, the timing that you engage in your activities, and which ones should follow in succession in an effort to maintain joint integrity. And we're also going to look at how our environments are modified. Now, the next slide, we're going to look at principles, the P's of joint protection. So the P's speak to reducing pain, preserving joint integrity, and maintaining performance. And to go into more specific diagnoses that would affect these things would be first and foremost, inflammatory arthritis. And so when we're looking at joint protection, we look at reducing the pain while doing an activity at rest, and maintaining the joint integrity speaks to reducing wear and tear on the joint, as well as reducing the inflammatory process, which happens by repetitive use and overuse of the affected areas. We're also going to speak to reducing fatigue and by reducing the effort required for our activity performance and overall improvement and maintenance of function. So you have to respect pain. So if at any time when you're doing an activity, you realize before, during, after that you feel discomfort, you should, well, after not really, but before and during, stop the activity before you reach to a point of too much discomfort or pain. I know there are a lot of people who are engaged in daily activities, and you just really have to get on with life and push through. But you know, especially if you have an active diagnosis, and I use arthritis as an example, but there are several other diagnoses that cause pain unrelated to activity or aggravated by specific occupations. And so we must respect the pain and limit the activities which cause the pain. So if you, for example, you have a bursitis in your shoulder and you decide that you need to clean the house today and sweep from top to bottom, and you know that the repetitive movement with the broom and the mop will aggravate that, you should take it in small portions and where possible, delegate to others in the household that have the capacity to do the occupation. We also have to think about the balance of the activity and rest periods. So oftentimes people work themselves until they are so tired that they can't eat or function later on. And so you should take rest before you become exhausted, and then plan rest periods during more difficult activities. So if you're thinking about outdoor activities, for example, cutting the grass, cutting the hedge, cleaning up around the yard, make sure that you're planning specific rest periods, even if it's 5 minutes between, and that makes a huge difference in terms of the execution of the occupation and the maintenance in that role in the future. So you also need to think about, in this context, about when we're using the computer, persons who are engaged in work-related activities at the computer, it is the gold standard says that you should take about 2 to 3 minutes every half hour. And rest is used slightly, but we understand that with time constraints, that isn't always possible. Where possible, take a break every 30 minutes. And taking a break doesn't necessarily mean stopping. It means to engage in something else. Use different muscle groups, engage other joints, because we also are aware that there's something called repetitive strain injury, which occurs as a result of overuse of the same muscle groups over a prolonged period. And because we are now constrained to very limited context, very limited environments, we are using the same muscle groups over and over. And so taking a break is very important. Now, if you already have a pre-existing diagnosis that causes pain, as I stated before, you should avoid activities which you can't break from. When you begin to feel pain, you should stop and prioritize the activities and consider the length of time that you need to engage. Now, persons who have neurological disorders like multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, and the like, you should plan difficult activities if you can't avoid them for times where your energy is at its highest. And that usually occurs before lunch. We are aware that during the day, the energy levels tend to peter off based on our engagement over the day in numerous activities based on your occupational profile and what you're required to do and what your roles are within the household and outside of the household. And so if you fall into this category, it is extremely important to be aware of these things and try to do the hardest task first. And that will allow you to preserve energy for the rest of the day and be able to execute the activity to the best of your ability. Next, we're going to talk about the importance of using larger, stronger joints for activities, and when possible, distribute the weight over non-involved or stronger joints. Now, a practical application of this is lifting a heavy bag from a countertop. So you should bend your knees, hug the bag close to you with both arms, bend your elbows so that the bag is held tightly to your chest, and straighten your knees. Keep hold of the bag by keeping your elbows bent. If the load is too heavy, push push and not pull. You can use your hips if you need to, and make sure that your feet are planted firmly on the floor. We're gonna later on in the presentation, we're gonna see actual pictures and practical applications of lifting and bending. The importance of using larger, stronger joints is that you have more muscle groups that are actively engaged, and the closer to the end of the limb we get in our upper limbs and lower limbs, the smaller the muscles become, and therefore the duration that they can be consistently engaged in the activity is much less. And therefore, by using larger, stronger muscle groups and joints, you are able to engage in an activity for a much longer period in a safer way. By holding heavy objects close to your body as well, eliminates gravity, and therefore your spinal muscles and core muscles don't have to work as hard. Avoid staying in one position for extended periods. Again, if you're having to move heavy loads, I know people are using this time, no, not this time, but prior to us being able to come outside a little bit more frequently, a lot of people have been cleaning up and packing up and moving. And so make sure that you're making plans within that for rest, and that you're being as dynamic as possible in terms of changing positions. And if need be, stretch and relax the joints between the activity. Now, maintenance of good alignment is of paramount importance during these times, well, during any time, because it really does help maintain proper posture. And within this context, we are encouraging you to use both hands when possible. For persons, again, going back to persons using the computer for prolonged periods and in the kitchen, people tend to overuse their dominant hand. Majority of the population is right-handed, and so if we use the phone in our right hand, and you chop up things with your right hand, and you use the mouse with your right hand, and answer the telephone with your right hand, you can understand the amount of wear and tear that occurs in the dominant extremity, and as a result, it increases the likelihood of you developing inflammatory arthritis or repetitive strain injury or bursitis or the like. And so the use of incorporating both hands shares the burden between all of the muscle groups, and again, encourages us to maintain the activities which we need to engage in during the day and during our all of our roles. Now, maintaining proper weight, this speaks to body weight, and whenever we have excess weight, it has an impact on all of our joints, but specifically our lower body, so our hips, our knees, our feet, and our spinal column. And so if we're thinking about being healthy and being balanced in every aspect of our lives, managing weight is of great importance. And a lot of the conversation recently has been around the prevalence of non-communicable diseases in our community, and weight management is of equal importance as having a balanced diet. And having a balanced diet contributes to us being able to manage our weight, in addition to being able to engage in physical activity. And so all of these things have a humongous effect on our joints and the capacity in which we can engage in our lives in a independent way and a pain-free way. So this slide says the next position is the best position. And basically what I'm highlighting is that we shouldn't stay in one place for too long. And if it's anything you take from this, I wish for you to take from this presentation, is to keep moving. Because when the old adage, if you don't use it, you will lose it, it is very real. And so if you operate within the same parameters on a daily basis, as I had alluded to before, you're going to be using the same muscle groups over and over. And so by incorporating movement and changes of context and environment, something as simple as standing up every half hour takes the pressure off of the muscles that you need to maintain sitting, which speak to your core muscles and your back muscles and the neck muscles and all of those things that are keeping you up in gravity, in addition to the posture in which you assume when you're sitting, and we're going to touch on that in a few slides. So you also have to think about avoiding repetitive hand activities. So things like when you're, those of us who are really good at crochet or sewing, you have to take breaks frequently and mix up the activities, and avoid pressure to the tip of your thumb specifically, because that causes a very painful type of tendonitis that affects this aspect of your hand. I know a lot of people are aware of the diagnosis of carpal tunnel syndrome, which falls into the category of repetitive strain injury. And carpal tunnel syndrome is basically the compression of one of the nerves in our upper limbs. And it is marked by numbness and tingling. Pain is generally not one of the first symptoms that occur with carpal tunnel syndrome, but it is present in the severe form of the diagnosis. And by the time you have gotten to experiencing pain with carpal tunnel syndrome, you have already done so much damage to the capsule and to the nerve itself that the likelihood of the numbness going away, because the numbness and tingling are the symptoms that occur first, but they generally are the symptoms that go away last. So pain associated with carpal tunnel syndrome is very easy to remedy. That's the symptom that tends to, in my experience, go away before the pain, the numbness and tingling. But by the time you have gone to pain, the diagnosis has been with you for so long. When I say long, it sometimes takes about 6 to 8 months to really get the manifestation of the diagnosis. And, you know, I'm not sure if any of you have experienced it, but most of the people that I have come into contact with that have this diagnosis say, you know, I really started to feel this thing, you know, I felt like I slept really badly and my hands started to feel funny. And, you know, and that goes on for about a few weeks, a few months. You take a little bit of Panadol and you realize it doesn't go away until the pain starts to come. And so you really have to be mindful of the causes of this, which really are the overuse of the wrist, and specifically going into, this is what we refer to as flexion, when you have your wrist bent forward and having a prolonged fist. So if you want to, at home, make a fist and look just below your wrist and watch and see what happens. You can see there's a capsule that kind of closes in a little bit. It's very subtle. And what is happening is the tendons are actually squeezing the nerve. So every time you make a fist, the nerve gets squeezed. And so in order to avoid this or reduce the likelihood of this occurring, you have to take breaks and modify the movements. And we're going to talk about how we can do that in a practical way shortly. Now, posture. Now we're going to speak to posture in walking. In this slide, it identifies poor walking posture. So the first picture, which has the green tick, that is really how we should be walking and what we refer to as neutral, where your neck is relaxed, shoulders are relaxed, the spine comes stacked one on top of the other. So your cervical spine, thoracic spine, lumbar, sacral, coccyx, and then your hips are, in this picture, in 0 degrees, so you're straight down, and then this picture is dynamic, so the person is walking. So a lot of the time, especially as we get older, gravity has done its work. If we spend, those of us who spend a lot of time sitting, the thoracic and the cervical spine tends to be flexed. And a lot of you may have seen people in the community walking like this. And so where possible, if this is you, try to maintain upright. Now, if this is if the middle posture is your posture, you really have to make a conscious effort to keep your shoulder blades back, because it is going to be uncomfortable for the first instance. Because over time, there's a phenomenon called creep that sets in that actually shortens the muscle groups and maintains that flex position. And so if any of you want specific exercises to correct this, feel free to message me or reach out after the presentation, and I'm happy to send you any handouts. But above all, you have to be conscious of it and try to keep your shoulder blades back together, and that will keep your chest up and maintain that neutral that I spoke about in the spine. The converse to that is hyperextension, which is the last picture. So hyperextension speaks to your spine being bent in the opposite way. And so what that does is put a lot of pressure on the muscles at the front. And so as a result, you can start to get a lot of lower back pain. And this posture, again, is related to persons who spend a lot of time, particularly with persons who use the screen, big screens that having to look up. And so being ergonomically safe, ergonomics is just working in a safe posture as it relates to, and we hear it more in the context of using computers, but ergonomics speaks to most of the activities that we do in our daily life, in the kitchen, laundry, that type of thing. So if in the context of using computers, however, if our screens are too high, our televisions are too high, you're going to assume a hyperextended posture, which is equally as damaging as a hyperflex posture. So be mindful about your posture when you're walking. And the next slide is sleeping. And this is something that we take for granted very often. A lot of people who have neck pain, shoulder pain, we often intervene in terms of sleep postures. And so the picture at the top illustrates how the support of the pillow impacts the position of the spinal cord. And as a result, your posture when you're sleeping. And so if we have pillows that are too thick or too hard, it actually forces our neck in a laterally flexed position, which puts more pressure on the lower portions of the spinal cord. And more often than not, when people are experiencing back pain, lower back pain, upper back pain, they think to change the mattress before they think to change the pillow. But the pillow really is the key to it. No, there are fancy cervical pillows that are sold in numerous places across the island, which they aren't cheap. The cheapest I've seen is $60. And it is not a one-size-fits-all situation because everybody's cervical curve is deeper or more extended than others. So you have to be fitted. You have to fit the pillow. And so this graphic shows, if we look at the first row of with the green pillow, with the skeleton, you see what happens if the pillow is too flat. Your neck goes into a hyperextended position and the cervical spine has no support in this area here. You can see my mouse, right? Okay. And in this picture, same thing again, when you're laying on the side, no lateral support there. So you need to fill up this space with the pillow, and that stops. So in these postures, your body wants to maintain alignment. And so what starts to happen is that muscle groups will fire because they're not being allowed to rest. So all of the muscles in this part of your shoulder coming up to the side of your ear will be firing all the time that you're sleeping. And so you're gonna wake up with stiff neck. And in a lot of instances, people start to get numbness and tingling in the fingers, which speaks to nerve compression as a result of malalignment further up in the cervical spine. No, this speaks to sitting posture. So when the first graphic, when we're sitting for very, very long periods in chairs that do not fit us, we tend to go into a slouched position, which puts a lot of pressure, not only on the back, but on the hip joints, on the knees, and on the ankles. And then if we go over to the other picture, conversely, if we are in a position where we feel relaxed, we tend to bend, especially if there's a table in front of us, we tend to bend over. And so when we're looking at sitting posture, it is so important to look at the chair that you're spending most of your time in. This part of the chair is called the seat pan. And I want all of you to do a little activity with me now. So sit upright, assume the position of the third gentleman in the graphic. And I want you to put your fingers between the edge of the seat and the back of your knee. If that space exceeds 2 finger widths, the chair does not fit you. No, how do we compensate for that space? Now, there are some adjustable chairs that actually have the seat pan adjustment that allows this part to move forward. If you don't have a chair like that, you may want to try a few chairs around the house and see how much support it offers you. This is important because if that space exceeds more than 2 finger widths, gravity starts to act on your thigh muscles, and it actually is pulling you toward the earth. I'm sorry, I pressed forward. Let me go backward. So it's actually pulling you toward the earth. And what happens is that your lumbar spine distracts, traction occurs. And so your body wants to stay in that position. And so the muscles are going to overfire to maintain that. So once you're sitting like this in a 90-degree posture, you eliminate gravity and automatically your muscles stop. They stop overworking. And so you're able to rest in a comfortable position, which is way more sustainable than this posture and this posture. So have a go and try some chairs in your house and see which ones fit you the best. Persons who are on the extremes of height, so really short people and very tall people, have a challenge fitting conventionally made chairs. Chairs are not a one-size-fits-all situation either. We're all different widths and different heights, and we all have our quirks about us. And so try and fit some of your furniture around the house and see how that goes. Now, we're going to move on to specific context. So in this slide, we're going to be looking at the working safely in the kitchen. And these are some graphics for some assistive devices for persons who already are living with inflammatory diagnoses, be that arthritis or repetitive strain injury or whatever. So the first image here is a bottle opener. And what that does is offload the small joints and allows you more torque to open bottles. This gadget is a spatula, and there's a whole line of kitchen aids that allows us to maintain neutral in our wrist. So you see this person's wrist is straight and the grip is not forceful. Remember we spoke about the forceful gripping and the impact it has on carpal tunnel syndrome specifically, but it also will relate to other diagnoses. So this grip is called Good Grips. You can find them on Amazon, and Carter's here in Barbados. I think Do It Best sells them as well. What they do is promote neutral postures in the upper limb for kitchen activities. And these are a few of the other gadgets that come in that line. So this is a knife. This is a spork, I guess, the thing that you stick into meat. I'm not sure what that's called. There's a cheese cutter and a spatula. So just an idea of things that can be used in the kitchen. Next, we're going to be looking at gardening. So those of us who enjoy time outside, avoid working above shoulder height. And if you are working on the ground, avoid bending forward. So you should be in a stooped or kneeled posture. And there are some little benches that I've seen around that people use to sit. And those allow us to engage in gardening for a much longer period than if you were to be bent over. You can find, when you are sitting on those benches, be mindful of your sitting posture, which was previous slide, and try to maintain upright. And in the first instance, it will be challenging, but it will be extremely beneficial for your body in the long run. When I say challenging, I mean painful. I'm fully aware that unless this is your everyday posture, assuming this posture now is going to be hard work, but it's going to take about 2 or 3 weeks for your body to adjust. And it will allow you to be able to engage in this activity for a much longer period. And more gardening stuff. So pull, if you have to pull weeds, pull with your elbows flexed and keep your wrists straight. So a lot of people try to pull with their wrists bending. And remember what we spoke about earlier about using bigger joints, bigger muscle groups, and maintaining the joint integrity of the small muscle, the small joints, and as a result, maintaining the length of the small muscles. So this picture here is a little bit blurry, but in the same line of the good grips for the kitchen, they've invented some for gardening. And what that does is maintain the neutral posture in the wrist and allow you to use your elbow and your shoulders for the activities. And so this graphic shows an ergonomic weed whacker. And so her shoulders are nice and relaxed, and the elbows at 90, and the wrists are nice and straight on both sides. And there's no over bending or over twisting when cutting in grass, if that's one of your favorite pastimes. And angled cutters, these are really good, again, for maintaining neutral of the wrist and taking the pressure off of the wrist and transferring it to the forearm, elbow, and shoulder. So again, looking at hand tools, if you're into outdoor recreation, the bigger the grip, the better it is for you. When you translate a grip from being like a small tripod grip to a larger grip, you're engaging bigger muscle groups again. And you can see in this image, this person is maintaining a nice neutral position of the wrist. All right, so now we've moved on to lifting, which we can apply to almost every context of our life. So be familiar with the item that you're going to be lifting, and don't do guesswork, because you know sometimes you see a box and you're really keen to move it and not sure what's inside, and sometimes you may overcommit yourself and it's a light box and you end up hurting yourself. And conversely, it could be a really heavy box and you're not prepared for the load, and you end up injuring yourself. And always have a plan as to where you're taking the load. So make sure that if you're taking heavy groceries from your car to the kitchen, that the door is unlocked before you take out the bags, because then you're gonna hurt your back and your joint in your upper limbs. And ask for help, especially those of us who have active diagnoses that are flaring up. Where possible, try to delegate and get assistance. I understand the innate need for us to be as independent as possible, but asking for help really, especially with your family within that context, really is valuable. So when lifting, bend your knees and not your back, and keep your chin up. Remember the slide about good walking posture, shoulders back, stick your chest up, proud as a peacock. And carry objects close to you. Remember, we're eliminating gravity and maintaining neutral. And don't twist while you're carrying. So don't twist your torso while you're having a load, because that puts pressure on the paraspinal muscles and increases the likelihood of injury, muscle strains, and the like. Disc bulges is something that really occurs from persons who do a lot of heavy lifting. And if you can't lift, you must push and not pull. You have more force going away from you than you do pulling. And if you get injured, ice is nice. So ice reduces swelling and inflammation. And so if you have ice packs, that's wonderful. If you don't, you can put ice in a bag, wrap it in a face towel and dampen it and leave it on the area for 10 minutes. Anything more than 10 minutes really isn't effective. So 10 minutes is a good time to keep the ice on. And I've also seen some DIY ice packs where you put equal parts water and alcohol in a Ziploc bag, and it never solidifies, but it makes a really nice ice pack. So if any of you injure yourselves or anybody in your household, remember to ice. And let's think about reaching in the kitchen specifically. This first image illustrates poor posture of the neck and the lumbar spine when reaching. So very possible, go close to the item in which you need to reach and maintain that nice standing posture. Now this person is working with an object over on his left, and ideally he should be working in a straight line to stop his torso from twisting. And also, if you look at the chair in which he's sitting, there's a huge gap between the back of his knee and the edge of the seat, which is putting large amounts of pressure on his lumbar spine. And so he's going to be in some pain tonight if he keeps that for at least half hour. So if this is you, if any of these pictures remind you of yourself or anybody that you see, make a mental note and make a correction. No, we're spending so much time on our laptops and computers and tablets and phones. And this picture, I'm sure is very familiar to all of us, spending time with our living room furniture on laptops. And so from top down, she has significant flexion in her neck, cervical spine, thoracic spine, coming down to the lumbar spine. And if you see how she's sitting, if she would sit back a little bit more in the chair, that would be a little bit more beneficial. But gravity is already working on her thighs and pulling her down. The knees are not at 90 and her ankles are actually pointing upwards. And so she's activating all of these muscle groups while she's just sitting there. So the height of the laptop is of extreme importance here. Remember what we spoke about before in terms of walking in a flex posture. So if she continues to do this over even 2 weeks, the posture for standing and walking will be altered. And by the time she's finished typing whatever she's typing, she'll be in so much pain. All she can do is lay down. And I assure you, she probably doesn't have a pillow that fits her nicely. So she'll be in a lot of pain. I'll probably end up in my clinic. So let us be mindful. If this is us, sit back and adjust the height of the monitor screen. The laptop screen, sorry. So now let's look at computers that are not in ergonomically safe. We don't have ergonomically safe furniture. People who have translated their workspace to a dining room table or a table that isn't fit for a computer. In this image, his monitor is way too high, and so his neck is in extension. But because the chair doesn't have arm support, his shoulders are engaged and the thoracic spine is in flexion. The forearms are floating in midair, and all of those muscles are working because his body wants to keep him in gravity. And we see how this chair fits him poorly and the position of his ankles. And the reason why there is this sign here is because he doesn't have, if he goes closer to the workstation, he doesn't have enough space to maintain neutral in the feet. And because he's short, he's going to need a footrest, which goes in this general area. And so if this reminds you of your setup at home, you have some changes to make. So remember, you want to maintain what we refer to as neutral, where you're looking straight ahead and the chair that you're in is fitting you. And if you are using computers for a prolonged period, your forearms must be supported. You must have a chair that has armrests on it. Now, let's think about exercising. And most of we can't go in the gym now. So we have the exercises in our living rooms and around our homes. And so let's think about the support that we need for that in our shoes particularly. So there are cushion socks that are available for those of us who have heel spurs and plantar fasciitis and the like. Those socks are very, very comfortable. Those of us who have very high arches, our supports are very, very important because in the same way that we are compensating and eliminating gravity, this has an impact on the muscle tension at the bottom of the foot. So those of us who have high arches would get arch supports like this, and those of us who have fallen arches, which is a real thing, would or low arches would get a different type of arch support. And I would have alluded to heel spurs. Heel cups are the general orthotic that is used for heel spurs specifically. So just a few ideas of ways that you can compensate for foot health really with exercising, but in a day-to-day context. So I thank you for this opportunity again. I'm not sure if we are open to questions. I'm open to questions. Yeah, so we can work safely, stay healthy, and protect yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melanie.
You're welcome.
if you want to stop sharing, then I can get everyone on screen so I can see the raised hands, etc. That would be helpful to me. Okay, perfect. Well, we have had a wonderful presentation from Melanie Büge, occupational therapist, and she has carried us through everything from sleeping, sitting, standing, doing a little gardening. Lisa, take note. If you're doing a little cooking like me, I know how to operate in the kitchen a little better. And also if you're living on a computer, because we have, even our children, we have to pay attention to them. Age does not discriminate with joint pain and mobility issues, etc. So we have had the full gamut covered by our very competent guest this evening, and I'm waiting to see if there are any hands raised in the chat or in the grouping. We got a first question, Melanie. What about trigger finger?
Trigger finger.
It's coming from Maureen. So if you want to address Maureen Shepherd is asking about trigger fingers.
Trigger fingers. So what happens with the trigger fingers? I'm going to use my thumb as the example. So on this surface, it's called the flexor surface. And there is a tendon that runs along this surface that allows us to bend. Trigger finger occurs when we're doing a lot of forceful bending, a lot of forceful gripping. And if you have trigger finger, or you suspect that you have trigger finger, I want you to press this area. Now, if it's not your thumb, you're going to press just at the base of the joint in this general area and see if you feel a bump. Trigger finger is also marked by clicking. So if your joint is bent and you can't straighten it out with like actively without using the other finger, and or it is very painful to straighten the finger, you have trigger finger. And so what happens is there are something called pulleys that are ligamentous in texture that affix that long tendon to the bone. And what happens is when you do a lot of flexion, the tendon actually gets a bump formed on it. And that's what I want you to feel for. It's called a nodule. So imagine the pulleys are like tunnels, and the tendon is a string that passes through, and it goes when you're bending the finger. The bump then gets stuck under that pulley, and that is what causes the triggering. Now, management of trigger finger is done by immobilization first and foremost. So you need to get something called a swan neck splint, and it actually stops the joint from bending, and that reduces the swelling on the tendon, the bump. It will make that go down. The second form is to reduce the inflammation, and that is done by icing. And then we also do specific friction massages and that type of thing. It's a little bit more technical. We do that in clinic, but at home, the first two things are immobilization and ice. Ice is your friend. It will help reduce the swelling significantly. Now, the gold standard is icing for a minimum of 3 times a day for 10 minutes. If you could get more than 3 times, 5 times is really the gold standard amount of time. 5 times a day for 10 minutes in ice, and place your hand on the ice as opposed to putting the ice back on your hand. You get a more equal distribution of the cold. I hope that was helpful. If you need any more guidance, you can reach out to me and I'll be able to, sorry, let me just say this, don't exercise. Exercise is bad. You have to limit the swelling first, immobilize it, and then you can strengthen the muscles around the affected area after. People tend to think when you have these things happening, you have to just keep working through it. But trigger finger is a diagnosis that you have to let time run its course, and you manage the swelling, and then the clicking will stop.
Okay, great. And we have another, thank you. Thank you for that question, Maureen, and thanks for the great answer. Going over to Tony Williams, and Tony is going to come in and ask his own question. So Tony, go ahead.
Very good presentation.
Thank you.
I have to learn from sleeping to living to do everything over in a different way right now. Ice versus heat. What's the difference? And why? In treatment of injuries and so on.
Okay, so you generally use ice when it's an acute injury. When I say acute, it has just occurred, and for probably the first 3 months of the injury. Heat, no. So let me make a distinction here. When you have a orthopedic condition, so small muscles, muscular, or joint, heat tends to work better with joint and muscle injuries. Ice tends to work better with neurological injuries, so peripheral nerve, so carpal tunnel syndrome. So what the heat does is reduces the tension within the muscles and allows for greater mobility. And the ice helps reduce inflammation and swelling. Both of them have a pain management component to them. There are protocols that exist that were created by the Association of Surgeons and hand therapists that speak to the prescription of ice or heat for a specific diagnosis. Within this context, we touch on a few of them. So carpal tunnel syndrome, we prefer to use ice because remember I said it's a compression of a nerve and not necessarily an issue with the joint. But with arthritis, it's a joint problem. Arthritis is inflammation of the joint, and the heat will, although it is inflammation, the heat actually helps reduce the discomfort associated with that. Now, if we think about the mechanism of arthritis and how people tend to say, oh, I know when it's going to rain or when outside is upset, I'm in more pain, that speaks to the beneficence of the heat for management of arthritis. Did I answer your question? Okay, good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for that question, Tony. And we have another question from Beverly. Beverly's asking, what is the difference between carpal tunnel syndrome and a condition called decurvens tenosynovitis? You'll say it better than I will, Melanie. And why would you experience such a condition in your left hand when you're right-handed?
When you're right-handed. That's a really good question. So let me answer the first part of this question first. Carpal tunnel is compression of the median nerve. So there are three main nerves that innervate the muscles in our upper limbs: the ulnar nerve, the radial nerve, and the median nerve. The median nerve compression is carpal tunnel syndrome. And as I would have alluded to in my presentation, carpal tunnel is caused by repetitive activity. And imagine your nerve to be like a garden hose, and you turn on the tap and then stand upon it. Everything beyond the point which you have stood, the water trickles through. Same thing happens with the nerve. So if you can imagine in your mind's eye a compression up here, you're gonna get the signals are going to be spotty coming through, and that is what causes the numbness and tingling. Now, as I had said before, carpal tunnel syndrome is marked by numbness and tingling and nocturnal pain at night more than pain with activity. Decurvens tenosynovitis is tendonitis of the tendons that are on this side of your hand. Now, everybody, we can do this together. Tuck your thumb in like this and push down. And if you get pain in this area, you have decurvens tenosynovitis. No, it is called tenosynovitis because it is inflammation of the tendon and the synovial capsule. It is not a pure inflammatory process. So if you have decurvens tenosynovitis, the likelihood that cataflam, ibuprofen, Voltaren, any of those things will have an effect are very low because it is not a pure inflammatory process. So if you look at your hand, if you are as slim as I am, you can see the tendons right here. They're two tendons that run very closely together and they rub. It's a friction inflammation. And so it is and that is what causes the pain. And pain is the marker of this type of tendonitis. So the management was the immobilization. So you have to get something called a splint to stop that movement. And that tends to occur with people who type for prolonged periods, for people who play musical instruments, for people who text in a very awkward position where their hands down like this. And so immobilization is the first thing. Heat is good before you do any exercises because you have to strengthen that whole capsule again. And ice will also help reduce some of the pain and other associated symptoms of decurvens. Now, why this occurs with your left hand, which is your non-dominant hand? No, I would have spoken to sharing the activity. And if you're not accustomed to doing a lot of activity with your non-dominant side, the likelihood that you will develop a repetitive strain injury on that side is higher because the endurance capacity is much lower on that side. Now, if you have, for example, if you're mousing, and some people use the mouse on their non-dominant side, but you're not accustomed to it, then that predisposes you to injuring your non-dominant side. So there are lots of factors that go into the reason why you develop repetitive strain injuries in your non-dominant side more than your dominant side. But the major one is the endurance aspect of it, the ability for you to be able to engage in an activity for a prolonged period in a safe way. So I hope I've answered your question, Beverly. And if you have any further questions related to that, feel free to reach out to me afterward.
Thanks so much. We have a question in the chat coming from Jillian. Jillian is asking, just wants you to go back to trigger finger a little bit and ask at what point do you think an injection should be considered versus the first choice?
Okay, so I was going to speak to injections, but I'm not a medical practitioner. Okay. So I'm not a doctor, but I'm going to say this. In my experience, injections for a trigger finger mask the pain. It does not get rid of the nodule. So what happens is people get the injection and the pain goes away and they continue to work as they did before and the pain will come back. So I generally, unless it is severe to the point where you can't do anything, you can't sleep, then the corticosteroid injection is beneficial. But if you're in an acute phase where it's just clicking and you get pain with the bend, but after you go back straight, the pain stops, is when you need to manage it conservatively. There's also surgical intervention for trigger finger, which the surgeon actually goes in, removes the nodule and the like. There are other complications that can occur as a result of surgery, chief being scarring. Now, if the scar isn't managed, it's going to tether or raise, and that will limit some of the joint activity later on, at a later date. And so I generally, as I stated, unless it is severe to the point where you cannot manage the pain conservatively, I generally do not recommend corticosteroid injections for trigger finger, mainly because people just continue to do what they have to do and further compound the issue.
Okay, thank you, Jillian. Can you follow up with that?
Yeah.
Okay, you're good?
Well, yeah, I basically, because I actually have trigger thumb.
Okay.
And when I was told about the injection, I was like, I don't know about doing this, because then I was getting to understand that it could come back. So I was like, why would I do an injection? Maybe I should do something to make it better rather than having to do the injection and then still be caught in the same position.
Yeah, but I want you to be mindful of this. The injection does not take away the nodule, you know. The injection takes away the pain,
correct.
Right? But the nodule is still there.
It's still there, right?
You're icing, you're actually engaging the nodule and trying to remove it from the, so it's basically swelling that occurs,
correct.
Because it has been there for so long, it feels like cartilage is hard, and so you have to mobilize that to allow the tendon to pass through the pulley. That's the basic pathophysiology of the diagnosis.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have Sheila Stewart, who is asking a question about plantar fasciitis and fasciitis and the treatment for that.
Okay, not a podiatrist, but I will say, so what causes it? So it could be a myriad of things, but plantar fasciitis is inflammation of the plantar fascia, the muscles at the bottom of your feet. And so the first thing that you need to address is your shoes, your foot support, and making sure that your arches are supported and that you're wearing cushioned shoes. Management for plantar fasciitis, you can put a pet bottle, put water in a pet bottle, freeze it and roll your foot on it in the morning, and that will help reduce the inflammation. Remember, I said ice is nice, and this is an inflammation. So ice will reduce any inflammatory process that is going on. So it's just two bits of intervention that I can offer. But if it is severe, speak to a podiatrist, and they are more qualified to manage this diagnosis.
Is that okay for you, Sheila?
Thank you very much. I suffer with that, but I find it's more painful in the morning when you first get up from bed, and as you go through your day, you don't feel the pain anymore, but it's very painful when you get up.
So as soon as you wake up, get your pet bottle, do about 20 rolls, and you will feel a huge difference.
Okay, thank you very much, Melanie.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now we have Lisa. Thank you, Sheila. Now we have Lisa's asking, what's the relationship between flour and joint pain?
Flour. Oh Lord, that's a nutritionist question. No. But the basic premise is the presence of gluten and the impact that it has on inflammation through our body, not only in our joints, but in our stomach and that type of thing. And in the way that we metabolize flour in being Black people, it's a very complex process. And we also have to think about the sugar aspect of the glucose that's present in flour. And that also has an effect on the joint health and integrity. But I think you should speak to a nutritionist who's way more qualified on this than I am. But it is gluten and sugar related.
Okay, thank you.
Great. We had a question coming anonymously from someone who is a male, and they played cricket when they were younger.
Mm-hmm.
And because they weren't very good at it, their hands kept getting quite a few knocks at wicket keeping, fielding, and medical attention was never sought because they thought they were a superhero. However, now he's really old. His hands are in constant pain, and he wants to know, what would you suggest?
Okay, so the first thing you need to identify is whether you have fractures that you're not allowed to heal. So you probably need to get an X-ray. That's the first place to start. If it is not fractured, if there are no fractures, and can I ask, is the person on the chat?
Yeah, I just spotlighted them next to you.
Oh, very old. So I'm thinking about old grandmaster. So, where in your hand are you getting any pain?
My fingers, all of my fingers.
All of your fingers. So it is likely that you may have had an old injury that has caused malalignment of your joints, which now is causing wear and tear. Likely arthritis. You're sounding like you're having arthritic pain. If you run your fingers along the side of your fingers, tell me if you feel bumps. If you feel
yes, they're all bumpy.
Yeah, you have arthritis. So you ever heard about paraffin? Warm wax.
Yes.
It's a really good form of moist heat that reduces the inflammation in the joints and helps with the pain. I'm also going to send you afterwards some hand exercises that you can do to keep the joints mobile and reduce some of the pain.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. He wanted to be anonymous, but I didn't feel it was fair. We had a question. Before I get to you, Maureen, I know that Ina and Erskine had up their hand earlier. Is that still necessary?
Well, I put it in the chat. The question was, how suitable are our church pews?
Oh, very good question. Very good question. So I've actually never been to St. George Parish Church, but I was a longtime member of St. Lawrence Anglican Church, and I can tell you the church pews there weren't very nice. And I'm short, I'm not a very tall person. So that's a very good question. And when we're constructing these things and purchasing this furniture, we must be mindful of what I have spoken about before in terms of the seat pan and how narrow it actually is. And a lot of times, especially in the 9:30 service, people tend to slide forward because if they're for a little while, the sermon is generally longer at 9:30 than at 7 o'clock when they used to go to church at St. Lawrence.
Yeah, St. George is always long.
Yes, so you tend to go into a more slanted forward position because the base isn't very wide. And so if we're thinking about promoting health and wellness in all aspects of our life, the church definitely needs to think about having pews that are a little bit more ergonomic friendly, encourage us to sit up in a nice neutral posture.
That's the case for shorter sermons, right?
Yeah.
Correct. Thanks.
Or standing a little bit more frequently. So stand for all of the hymns, not just the ones that aren't in mission praise.
All right. So Maureen had a quick comment that she wanted to respond to Sheila about the plantar fasciitis. Go ahead, Maureen.
Yes, it's just that I had a similar situation for months. I mean, it were really, really bad. So I had all kind of tests and this thing, but I then was told to wear, I walked around barefooted for all my life up to like a couple of years ago or last year, I think it was. It was suggested that instead of walking in the house and so on barefooted, Sheila, I'm not sure if you wear shoes in the house, but a nice cushion, soft shoe or anything like that, or even if it's a wedge, but whatever you're comfortable with. But instead of walking on the tiles and the hard surfaces, that you needed to correct that. And that was fantastic for me. It's excellent. I didn't have a repetition.
Sorry, Sheila, I had you muted. You can go ahead. You have to unmute, Sheila.
Okay, okay. Thanks, Maureen, for that suggestion. I tend to walk about in my house barefooted. But I did buy some support for my shoes to help when I'm going out and walking.
Yeah, but in the house would be pretty okay. So I'm like just wearing shoes in the house all the time. I had to get accustomed to that.
Okay, so I should probably try that and see what happens. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Okay.
Sisters helping sisters. That's wonderful. And Sandra Ince wanted to get an idea about how much time really should you spend in the garden in any one go? I know you said to do everything in moderation. So any comment about that, Melanie?
Well, cumulatively, you should spend, I would say, a maximum of 2 hours. So within that 2 hour frame, you will take 4 breaks. So every half hour, take a break for a short period. But if you have a lot of gardening to do, the suggestion is to do some in the morning for a while, take a break and come back in the afternoon. Particularly if you're doing the same thing. So if you're pruning or digging something and you're using the same muscle groups over and over, you should try to space it out and limit as much time and allow the activity to occur over a longer period of time as opposed to trying to dig up a garden bed in one day.
That's cool, Sandra. Everything in moderation.
I will try, but most of the time it doesn't work for me because taking a half hour, what am I going to do in between that time?
Well, do something else, not necessarily stop. So if you have laundry to hang out, water to boil, potatoes to peel, do something else because then you're engaging other muscle groups.
I will try. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. We had a question coming from, thanks, Sandra. Sorry about that. We had a question coming about all those cracking sounds you get in your fingers and other joints. What causes that?
It's basically wear and tear in the joint and loss of muscle atrophy. And as we get older, the muscles get a little bit weaker and smaller, particularly as it relates to what our daily jobs are. So if we are engaged in a heavy work, the muscle tension tends to be maintained. And so the repetitive strain injuries and that type of thing become an issue. If you're like on a computer and doing more light work, you tend to not have very strong finger muscles. And as a result, the muscle atrophy sets in, but it's basically wear and tear over time. We aren't made to last forever. So some parts of us start to go bad as we age, and that's inevitable. All we can do is to manage the pain and modify our activities in order for us to be able to do them for as long as possible.
We have a follow-up to that about how bad is it when you're really young and you do get these cracks at a young age?
You know, there's so many mixed opinions on this. There's nothing scientific that has come out to say do not crack your knuckles. But if you think about what you're really doing is forcing joint to move, and what that does is actually cause more wear and tear on the cartilage between the joints, which protect the joint, and as a result cause inflammation as we get older. And so it really isn't a practice that is promoted, but everybody has different effects, and your genetic makeup plays a role in that. What your job is plays a role in that. Your general overall health plays a role in that. But if you just think about the mechanism of cracking your fingers, I would strongly recommend that you don't. Although some people say like they get really stiff and they feel like they have to, there are other ways that you can reduce that tension without forcefully cracking the joint.
But Melanie, I think she was also asking, is it bad that your joints are naturally cracking? Not that she's
I wouldn't call it bad or good. It's just a phenomenon that occurs. Right. My knees cracked from the time I was like 5 years old, and I never have knee pain. I guess it's just how my joints are aligned, but I don't know if it's bad or good.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So Catherine,
everything cracks on Catherine.
Catherine was saying everything cracks on her. And I know that feeling, Catherine. Okay.
We need to exercise, Catherine.
We have our head of our Ushers Guild, Mark Norville. He has a question of you. Mark, go ahead.
Yes, thanks very much, Adrian, and a very excellent presentation from our guests.
Can you raise your volume a little bit more, Mark? A little hard to hear.
Yeah, any better?
A lot better, thank you.
Yeah, very good presentation from our guests.
Thank you.
Just wondering if there is any real treatment for heel spurs. If there's any exercise you can do to ease the pain or get rid of them completely.
Okay, so
that's the pain of the heels, not the heels.
So heel spurs are a bony deformity that occurs. You can strengthen the muscles around the area, but that doesn't generally remove the spur. The management of heel spurs really speaks to your footwear and the presence of cushion support under the heel, and that helps reduce some of the pain. But again, I think you should seek guidance from a podiatrist because they may have, I don't specialize in feet, so they may have a little bit more know-how on managing heel spurs, but I know for sure having the soft support in the heel makes a humongous difference in pain.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Somebody earlier asked about having bad knees and not being able to stoop and garden. And this is a real problem that I see with my patients on a daily basis. Where possible, try to have raised gardens. So I'm not sure if your garden is like actually in the ground or if you have them in buckets or in barrels or whatever. But if you do have them in barrels and buckets, you can elevate the surface that you're working on so that you're not stooping. So put them on an old table or elevate them on blocks. That helps reduce the strain of stooping and gardening. If unfortunately you are in the ground, you need to get a small chair and sit and stop stooping.
Thanks, Melanie. Okay, well, for everyone in the chat on the Zoom, you have to understand that Melanie does this for a living, and has a clinic, and she's going to tell us that about her clinic, where it's located, and how she can be contacted if you want to get a consultation done on your particular issue. Because there are a couple of objectives with this exercise. One is for information for our members and our friends about topical issues, but also us supporting businesses and helping businesses who are having their own issues surviving in this marketplace have an opportunity to expand their client reach. So we're really appreciative of Melanie. So Melanie, if you can just share with us how we can reach you and make an appointment to see you. Occupational therapy is not something you hear every day. So I'm glad you had a chance to sell yourself and let us know a little bit more. But let's hear from you. How can we reach you?
Okay, so my clinic is Quality of Life Therapy Services. I am located in Perone Village, just behind what people used to refer to as Big B Supermarket at the bottom of Rendezvous Hill. So that's the physical location. I also have an Instagram for those of you who are on Instagram. And on Instagram, there are a few videos for working safely from home and other tips and tricks that are useful in our daily lives, particularly during this pandemic period. In terms of getting in contact with me, my number is 838-9410. You can WhatsApp that number. And if you go on the Instagram page, there is the website that's linked and the email address. You know, I have gone into this profession to not only help God's people, but to promote health and wellness in a general sense. And although I am very honored to have this opportunity to promote myself, I really am not here for myself. I am here for the profession, to promote what we do. There are 13 of us registered in the association, and we all intervene in different aspects of life. My specialty is physical dysfunction, which deals with neurological and orthopedic conditions, but there are also occupational therapists who work with mental health. And that is hugely important during this time, being able to manage all of the stress and domestic issues that are present during this time. And so I want to use this opportunity to also promote my colleagues who do very, very hard work in the community. There are very few of us on the island, and to service a population of this size, as you would anticipate, is a very big challenge. So while I am grateful for the support, I want you to remember the association, the Barbados Association of Occupational Therapy, the Barbados Occupational Therapy Association, sorry, in your thoughts. And, you know, feel free to reach out. I understand fundamentally that my practice is a business, but at the same time, I'm very aware of the economic constraints that exist in this current environment. And as such, my clinic has been offering free slots for persons who can't afford therapy, but need to be in contact. So it's not just a way to make, it's not just about money for me. It's not about money at all, actually. If we didn't have bills to pay, I wouldn't charge, to be honest. I'm here to do the work that I have been ordained to do on this earth, which is to help people. And so keep me in your prayers and my colleagues, and I thank you so much for this opportunity. If any of you need any other information, feel free to reach out. I will ask the secretary to circulate my email that you can reach out, or follow us on Instagram. It's QOL Barbados, and you will find all of the information there. Unfortunately, we aren't on Facebook as yet because my social media manager is appealing to the younger crowd, not wanting to be prejudiced, but we'll be on Facebook soon.
Okay, Melanie, we have one more question. There's not a quick wrap. One question, and then we're going to wrap. Galaxy J8 is asking, what is the association between arthritis and stiffness of the knee and calves, especially when seated?
Okay, so stiffness is a complication of arthritis. And so they are coupled. And so let's think about neutral sitting. And I'm not sure if you saw the image of correct sitting. So imagine this is your back, this is your hips, and here is your knees. You want your hips to be at 90 and your knees to be at 90 degrees. If you aren't able to achieve that position on your own, you may have to think about getting a footrest to compensate for the space at the bottom of your feet to allow your knees to maintain a 90-degree angle. If you don't have this position, you're actually firing the muscles in your calf to keep your feet supported. And remember, gravity is acting all the time. We can't turn off gravity. And so whenever your joints are unsupported in gravity, your muscles will fire. So think about altering your seating position, and feel free, if you need more guidance, to add me on WhatsApp, take a picture of yourself in the chair, and I'll tell you how to specifically change that.
Thank you so much, Melanie. So we've had a great session, and we continue to expand this series. Before we get into the vote of thanks to Melanie, we are going to ask our coordinator to talk about next week's program and to say a few words. So Lisa, just handing to you right now.
Hi, good evening, everyone. First, let me thank those who participated last week and are back with us this week again. We appreciate your presence, and I will leave the vote of thanks for the appropriate person. But Melanie, I want to thank you, and I also want to thank your colleague, Sid Prescott, who deals with mental health and who highly recommend you to give this presentation this evening. So I saw Sid on earlier, and I really want to thank her for the suggestion. So next week, we have who's here with us this evening, Sheila Stewart, who is a sociologist. All right, that's it. So Sheila next week will deal with the topic of handling stress. And that's a big issue for us during this COVID period. So we look forward to your presence again. I really appreciate, seeing some of the familiar faces and by the names of your devices and stuff on. So let us give Sheila the same support that we've given to Stacia and Melanie this evening. So I will hand over to Miss Ryan, Roslyn Ryan, who will move the vote of thanks.
Roslyn, looking for you. Are you on camera, Roslyn? Can you come on camera, please? So I can spotlight you. Okay, let me find you in the participant log. Okay. Yeah.
Hello and good evening to everyone. May I apologize in the beginning because of technical difficulties, but I joined about the midway point, and I want to say to Mrs. Büge on behalf of the organizers of the meeting and the participants, very impactful and valuable presentation. I myself have problems in the lumbar area because of a very bad fall I had about 10 years or so ago. I'm starting to walk today, but I can't walk because I had to do a period of time, and then so I had to practice walking about again. But I thank you. I saw your presentation on damage for overreaching and the way you should sit at your computer at home and so on. So I thank you very much. If we follow the advice and the guidelines which you gave us, I'm sure many of us will help lives with fewer aches and pains. I can tell you about the aches and pains when I wake up in the morning, can't get out of bed. I have to sort of, like an old car, crank up until I get on my feet again to go through the day. So thank you very much, Mrs. Büge. And I wish you all the best with your career, the work you're doing. That is work you're doing for God. And I know that you will be successful in your future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roslyn. We really appreciate that. Lisa, over to you.
Yes. So, Melanie, it is customary that we will give our presenters a token of appreciation. In reading your bio and hearing you speak this evening, we recognize that you were there for the vulnerable in the community. Hence, our token of appreciation to you will be a food hamper, compliments the St. George Parish Church, Deacon's Cupboard for you to give to a needy family who you there. So that is our token of appreciation to you, and we have that delivered to you at the appropriate time. Yes, so thank you very much. Over to Adrian.
Thank you so much, Lisa. What a wonderful gesture. And thanks to all of you once again for joining us this evening. And as often as usual, we will close our evening in prayer. And you heard from Senator Reverend Dr. Rogers give the opening prayer. Now you'll hear the rising star in St. George Church, Reverend Suzette Archer, who will come and join us this evening to bring our closing prayer. Reverend Sue.
Thanks very much, Adrian. Good evening, everybody. And I too want to add my gratitude for a very comprehensive presentation from Melanie. I have some issues of my own, but I will need to speak with you on a one-on-one. Too many to talk about right now.
No problem.
Right, let us pray. Lord, we thank you for opportunities such as this where we can meet and learn and share and take away. Father God, we thank you for persons such as Melanie who have dedicated their life's work to helping others. We pray and ask you to continue to bless and guide and strengthen her in all she does. We ask you to bless every participant represented here and their households. And we pray and ask you for a peaceful and restful night. And if it be your will that we shall rise to see a new day, we thank you in advance. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Reverend Sue. And Father John, if you just want to just share with us the services for this week. We are now in our first, it's Palm Sunday, and restrictions have been lifted where we can have in-church service. So any plans you want to share with our guests this evening?
Okay, good evening once again, everyone. We return to in-person worship on Sunday with our usual two services, 7 a.m. and 9:15 a.m. And I've indicated to persons to just kindly give us a little nudge in at the St. George Parish Church email to let us know if you'll be which one you'll be attending. Obviously, we have to follow the protocols. There are only 75 persons allowed. We will update you whether we'll increase the number of services per Sunday, but we suspected at the council level that the return may not be as rapid as would necessitate more than the two services that we currently have at 7 and 9:15. We'll also have in-person worship on Wednesday, and of course that is a service that usually has about 60 people, so that will not be a problem, and so persons are free to attend that. And of course our usual Friday morning mass at 6:30, but for Palm Sunday, we will update you as to whether there'll be just the two services or whether we will have to add an extra one because more persons than the 150 would want to be there from the two services. So for now, on Sunday, it is 7 and 9:15 a.m. And we'll continue to stream as usual.
Thank you. I got my dates wrong, so it wasn't Palm Sunday this Sunday, but
no, Sunday is the 5th Sunday in Lent.
Right. I'm rushing the month so far, but we're still in the middle of Lent, and you can subscribe to our channels on YouTube. You can visit us or email the St. George Parish Church at hotmail.com. Send us a note if you want to join our family at church. And you can also follow us on Facebook, and we can be kept up to date by our communications ministry, who's done a wonderful job of keeping us informed. Thank you all for joining us this evening for this virtual seminar series of engagement on occupational health and well-being. Thank you once again, Melanie Büge, for such a lovely and an educational presentation, and we wish you God's blessings in your practice and the other 12 members who are helping to keep Barbadians healthy and safe. And we want to thank all of you and ask you all to keep safe, recognizing that we all have to follow the protocols. Wear your masks, 6 feet apart, and social distance always, and wash your hands, do all those good things, and we can get out of this together with God's grace. With hope and positive vision, we can make Barbados safe again and play our role in helping to control the pandemic. But we've enjoyed hosting you this evening. Thank you, Father Rogers and Reverend Sue, for hosting us this evening. Thank you, Lisa, for coordinating us. Thank you, Rosalind Ryan, for the vote of thanks. And thank you, Sandra Innes, for your welcome and introduction. And thank you once again, Melanie, for joining us. Good evening, everyone from St. George Parks Church. Have a wonderful evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you.
See you all next Wednesday.
Same time, same place.
Same time.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night.
Good
Bye.
night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. We will have the presentation available to email to anyone that would be interested as well. With Melanie's permission, Lisa will coordinate the details.
And you can send it so it can be uploaded to YouTube.
Okay, great.
Good night.
Okay.
I said good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Night, night.
Night. Bye.
Are we only having 2 services?
Yes.
7 and 9:15. Yes.
Right, not 3. The rest gonna watch by Zoom.
7 and 9:15.
Which service is Main Street?
That will be done offline.
But the people might need to know.
We will send it out.
Okay. Bye.
Good night.
I'm not sure why that's still there.
For one-on-one counseling and mentoring, contact yesterday at 535-38 and get your business moving. The Youth Entrepreneurship Ministry, Sports and Community Involvement. Business Report brought to you with the compliments of Republic Bank. We're one for you. It is a multi-faceted